she taught us how to actually cite ChatGPT and AI properly. So it wasn't, you would still have academic integrity. But also, she was showing us there was this podcast AI that you could do, and you would upload the reading into it. And so by uploading the reading into it, these two fake people would be talking about the reading, and then you could intervene and ask a question. And so it was like, it was really cool to see. I'd say last year, the transformation from when I started in September when it came to AI, by the time I had finished my diploma, was like completely 180 with the acceptance of it.
One of the most powerful things about this whole AI in education conversation is the opportunity that we have to really understand how to do this together with our students, with the whole community, but particularly with our students. And while the notion of student voice is not something brand new, I think in this case, it has extra value in the sense that our high school students in particular, and our early post-secondary students, are the last generation of students who remembered learning without AI. And so they bring, I think, a really important perspective as they in some cases, not all, but in some cases, carefully navigate this place. And that's today's conversation with Noah Pearmain, who is a student at the School of Finance and Management in Frankfurt. He's a Vancouver boy, and you may notice his last name. He is the son of Superintendent Mark Pearmain from Surrey School District. And this interview came about as a result of a conversation that I had with Mark, telling me about his son Noah and his really fascinating use of AI in a post-secondary context. And in particular interesting as it comes from, a place outside of Canada, in Germany. And the stories that I'm hearing about the way it's being taught, thought of, and presented, particularly in post-secondary, a little bit mirrors, but even more so, the diversity that we're seeing, where you are getting a lot of acceptance by many professors, many educators, and then a lot of just kind of completely shut down. So I've heard a variety of these stories, but this is the one that I think really opens up the possibility of how we might be thinking about using this. And so it was really important to hear from Noah and get his perspective on AI, and really just a great kid. And listen, anybody at that age is a kid to me, even though, yes, he is indeed a young man. But I appreciate the conversation, the time Noah took to share his story. And I hope you use this to launch maybe some conversations that you might have with young people as to what they're thinking and how they're beginning to adapt in the use of generative AI. So join my conversation today with Noah Pearmain. Noah, this is great to have you here. You are my first person of youth, young person, student, however we want to frame this. And you're here via your father, who's been a previous guest on the show. And it was he and I having dinner one evening, and told me a little bit about your story. And so we want to kind of get into that today and learn a little bit about the role that AI has played in your, at least your university career, but we might go farther back than that. So do you remember the first time you came across generative AI?
Yeah, so I came across it in my grade 11 year. It was like, I want to say February. So it was relatively quite early, like about 4 months maybe after ChatGPT was released.
Yeah.
And I think I was like almost any other student. I was a little bit skeptical. And I remember, I think my first question I asked her was like, do you know where I am? All of those really basic questions that really didn't do anything. But I didn't really start using it until probably about grade 12. And I think my dad, obviously, he's in education. So I never really used it to substitute my learning. I always used it more from a resource standpoint. And the first time I would say was I had uploaded my resume when I was doing my university applications, and I just asked it what I should include and what maybe I should not include on it.
Right.
But then from there, I just would say it progressed. And
but I guess I wonder, like in those early phases, especially in that grade 11, grade 12 year, were there times or instances where you saw, I could just use this to completely, like, Like there were, and can you even give an example of perhaps an assignment that you were given that you thought I could just pump this into
Yeah, for sure.
AI
It
and
was
be done with
any
it?
single writing assignment. Like some of my friends, they used it quite a bit, and some other like
Right.
classmates did. Actually, one time was a presentation, and they had uploaded the command into it. So it was like, hey, no worries, here it is. And we were all just sitting in class, just waiting for the teacher to recognize what was happening. But
And
no,
did
and
they not?
but I was
No,
thinking
I mean,
about that
yeah.
too. Teachers must have been so confused going from reading essays from grade 11s, and then next thing you know, they're reading like a full-on research paper that looks like came straight from a textbook.
And that's the story that many educators will share. They're going like, "Whoa, what happened here? Like, how did we go? How did we make this leap?" Wouldn't have taken them long to figure it out. And then, of course, then becomes the whether it's panic or curiosity or whatever emotion would hit you at that point is like, now what do we do? But it's interesting though because I'm finding that with people. So you represent this, you will be labeled as whatever, I don't know, whatever gen, whatever you are, but the
Yeah,
first generation who remembers, or sorry, the last generation who remembers what it's like to
yeah,
learn without AI, because those are kids that are even in middle school right now. Like it's pretty blurry for them because, like you said, it was 3 years ago, and so their memories of learning without AI will be somewhat blurred. It's high school kids now who have that recollection of, wait a minute, I didn't used to write like this. I didn't used to
yeah,
learn like this. And so I think there's an interesting tension within your generation around, to your point, kids that using it for just like, I just going to get this done, to those like yourself who are saying, I don't necessarily want to give away my learning, but how might I use that? So even talk a little bit about attitudes in general of your contemporary, of
yeah.
your
I'd say
friends,
there's probably
colleagues.
about three main groups, and it's what the first group are the individuals who don't even touch it. A few of like my classmates, not because they're scared of it or anything, just they don't want to. They would rather do it
Okay.
themselves and learn all the subjects
Sure.
themselves. And then there's the ones who use it just completely to do all the work for them, and then or as like a substitute for their brain. And then I would say the large majority is more like myself, at least at my university here, where it's a teaching resource. It's a tutor that you can ask any question at any time of the night.
And let's get into the story that your dad shared with me, because it'd be
Yeah,
better coming from you anyway. Is so you're, my understanding, are you a
yeah.
business guy? Is
I
that what
got
you're in right
last year.
now?
I have a foundational diploma in business administration, but I've switched my bachelor's this year, so I'm getting a bachelor's of science in management, philosophy, and economics. Called MP.
And yeah, that philosophy part probably makes me think, helps again, aligns with what how your dad described your sort of disposition, in that you're more of a I don't know what easy way to say it, but you're
Yeah,
more of a people person. Like you that's where your strength is, as opposed to the typical business math guy who's like head down, really good with numbers,
man.
but maybe not so good with the personal side of things. So I think that's where this story
Yeah. So like,
kind of started.
I'll be like completely honest. Math was my worst subject, starting from kindergarten going to grade 12, to the point where I think my highest grade was maybe a B, and that was in grade 9 in math. And so I came into university going into this finance school where I needed to do calculus. And so I was so nervous. My first semester was really hard. I scraped by, I passed. And then I was going to get a tutor. And then one of my friends actually, he suggested that Khan Academy has an AI on ChatGPT that I could maybe use to see if it would help. And I was very skeptical at the beginning, but within probably about 2 days of using it, it had completely done a 180 for myself. And so with it, I was able to go from the basics of whatever we were learning, whether it be linear regression, and it would just ask me the fundamentals of what I knew, and then it would
Right.
get the questions off of my experience or my level, rather than me getting overwhelmed looking at this multiple equation step. And so I would say it really built up my confidence at the beginning. And then also I started then using it to teach me those subjects. And so with math, it was, I would always have an issue with, I'd make one small mistake at the very beginning. And then by the time you finish the solution, the answer is negative 400 when it should be 19 because it was a minus instead of a positive. And so what I realized what I could do was that I would solve it. And then if I didn't have the correct answer, I would upload it to the AI and it would be able to pinpoint exactly where I went wrong. And then I could learn from that. But then I realized, well, if it can do that, it could teach me the new topic. So I would then upload, we were learning about matrices, and I would be working through the question with me. So I could be referencing if I would get confused, okay, what do I do next? Where do I go from there?
So one thing I'm curious, because I mean, I'm
Yeah.
obviously I'm very familiar with Khan Academy, and its structure is designed for, and this is what we're seeing a lot of these sort of educational focused AIs, is not to give you the answer. So I guess I wonder about the helpful side of Khan Academy to align with your own kind of
Mhm.
desires and what you wanted out of the tool. And then have you since transitioned into just using whatever ChatGPT or general AI tool? So I'm just wondering about even the way that experience for you
Mhm.
initially was, wouldn't allow you just to get the answer anyway, because that's not how that
No,
specific
exactly.
platform
I would have to put
is
in the
designed.
answer, and if I got it wrong, then it would work you through the steps. But when I got to the more complicated math sections and calculus sections, it wasn't really doing it for me anymore, if that makes sense. It was
Right. So that's why you
yeah,
transitioned just to using
yeah, and
ChatGPT
I
to
had
do the same thing.
transitioned, and then I had got the pro account, I guess you would call it, what allows you to create a personality and a memory bank. So with the
Right.
personality, it was I encouraging, I put in like coaching and tutoring. So
Yeah.
if I'd make a mistake,
Yeah.
for me, when I would do math, I'd make a mistake, I'd get defeated and then go, okay, I'm going to take a break from this. But it would then pound me to continue going. And in that sense, it was super
Yeah.
helpful.
And then there reaches this point where you've got some of your classmates are struggling too, and there's a bit of a collaboration that happens between you and some of your classmates, and I think
Yeah.
even your professor. So
So
what
then
happened?
it
What
grew from
happened there?
math though. So like math was, I started doing that in January, but I'd say that my school here, they're
Right.
in finance and banking, 90% or something of the current companies all use AI in their daily work. So it's something that we're getting actually
Right.
taught, like prompting, how to prompt and do, and they're quite open on it. So it started in October, and it started in my business management class. And we had to do this, it was a very big project, I think 50% of our grade for that semester, and business plans. And we had to create like a restaurant in London. And that's when AI and chat had just released the AI imaging. And so what we did was that we used the AI imaging to actually create what a restaurant would look like in London at the location that we had picked. And we had to present it to five profs who were basically, we were pitching them to invest, quote unquote. And our professor came up at the end of the presentation and was like, how did you get these images? Because it had our logo, it had everything into it. And it was my mistake. We didn't ask if we could do it because it had just come out. It was this new thing. So we showed him. And we're like, oh, look, you can create whatever you want with these images. And I think he was blown away from that because the next lecture we went to, we had the AI then images in the presentations for the diagrams and stuff. But that was in business management, but it was also in English in our academic writing class and using it for grammar for students who don't speak English as their native language. And how it worked
Right.
was that we would have one academic writing class a week, and individuals, they would write all the answers and you'd have to put in grammar into the sentences and then hand it back to the prof and you'd receive it the following week. But I would say probably in end of October, beginning of November, we actually showed her you can take a photo of this and upload it, and it will give you the grammar suggestions. And she was really, that prof was really accepting of AI, I would say, from that. So we stopped doing any essay based grading. It was all presentation based. And she taught us how to actually cite ChatGPT and AI properly. So it wasn't, you would still have academic integrity. But also, she was showing us there was this podcast AI that you could do, and you would upload the reading into it. And so by uploading the reading into it, these two fake people would be talking about the reading, and then you could intervene and ask a question. And so it was like, it was really cool to see. I'd say last year, the transformation from when I started in September when it came to AI, by the time I had finished my diploma, was like completely 180 with the acceptance of it.
So yeah, and it sounds like you cited a couple of different profs who are very curious and saying, "Wow, this is," and then taking
Yeah.
what you've shared with them, and then immediately incorporating it into the learning because they just. So, have you not come across a different perspective from profs that are just like don't know what to do with it and have to shut it
Yeah, like
down
we
when
had
it's
one of
using
my
it?
profs last year. I think one of the big things is that, especially in university, the boundaries that the prof set, you have to respect them because otherwise, yeah,
Yeah, and they're different, right? Everybody runs
exactly.
their own
And so
store.
our like my economics prof, it was strictly no AI, and for me that wasn't necessarily that big of an issue. It's economics, so it was more just studying based. But for all of the presentations and
Right.
stuff, it was relatively fine in that sense. But I do want to add one thing was that with the economics, what we ended up doing during our exam period in May was that a good friend of mine, he created a workflow using AI. And so we were getting our definitions sent to us every 30 minutes while we were studying. So we could be passively reviewing for the exam. And that, I would say that was really like, oh, wow, you can do a lot with this new technology if you use it properly.
Yeah, and it's I think what's fascinating is again this varying acceptance and degree to which that works. And the other thing I think about, and again, it's so
Yeah.
you're in your second year now, and like you said, like every kid in the world that goes to university for the first time, there's always going to be apprehension and you're
Mhm.
just like a little nervous. It's a whole new experience for many reasons. I wonder about if you can quantify or describe AI's role in just helping reduce some of the anxiety that might exist around all of the newness that comes with being a university student. Because I think that
Yeah.
is for many, when you think about dropout rates, you think about all that stuff,
Yeah.
it's pretty high. And it's a big, for some kids, it's overwhelming. All of the things that have to be, that you
Yeah.
have to manage. I don't know if you can quantify that or again, you've only been to
Yeah.
university with AI, so you don't have a before piece, but I don't know if you
No,
can
for sure.
talk
Like
about that at
for
all.
what I found personally for myself is that I would always be embarrassed to ask questions in these lectures when I wouldn't know what they were talking about in math because I didn't want to make myself not look super smart in front of all these new people I just met. And
Sure.
so that was one of the things that it actually helped relieve for me was that I could go home and I could ask the easiest question that someone would probably laugh at in class, and there was no like that social anxiety part. But even I found like during my exams, I would be freaking out before going into an exam, and I would be asking like putting it in, and it would be like calming me down. Be like, no, you studied so hard. Like
Yeah.
we've gone through this together. You're okay. And I would go into the exam, but not super stressed out, not with my brain going everywhere. And so I do really think how you use it, it obviously affects it. But even with like habits, trying to build healthy habits once you leave the house, because you lose all your
Sure.
routine, right? Like I grew up going to school, I lived in the same house. And so that was 12 years of my life basically. And then I hopped on a plane. went to Frankfurt. I don't speak any German, so that was a massive change. Like the visa requirements, learning about German bureaucracy, where you couldn't really search it up and get a response. Where I would ask with the chat GBT, for an example, how do I get in contact with the visa office here? Because you can't phone them and you can't go without an appointment. So using it as that sort of like life tool or like a little bit of an assistant, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I found that super helpful, especially like last year and including this year when I was moving into my new apartment. Where do I go and get like a cheap duvet? Because I don't want to go into the downtown and buy a really expensive one. Or where should I go eat? Just
Right.
becoming more comfortable in my area, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, and some of those things are maybe natural extensions of what people would previously
Hmm.
done with search. But of course, search can frustrate you because it isn't quite
Yeah.
getting you where you want because it's just listing here's some sources where you might find the answer here, but you still got to go in there and dig, and maybe it's there, maybe it's not. I understand that. The part I want to just ask you a little bit about, and it's the part that I think as when I think about the
Mhm.
risks of AI,
Yeah,
of
for
which
sure.
there are many, one of them is that for me, and I'd like to hear your perspective on it, is the degree to which we, I don't know if we use the word anthropomorphize or whatever, but like we see AI as an
Yeah.
actual human being. Like you talked about the fact that it
Yeah.
encourages you. So, and you may be aware of some of the stories of people that have gone off and formed these bizarre
Yeah. Yeah.
relationships, if you will, with AI, which seems extreme. However, I think the way we interact with AI now, saying thank you, please, and literally, I don't know if how much you use the
Mm.
voice component of it. You actually have real
Yeah.
conversations
Yeah.
with this machine. Do you ever think about the line, defining the line between, of
Yeah.
course, you know it's a machine, but you know what I mean? As you're interacting with it, it doesn't feel
Yeah, for
like a
sure.
machine.
I think it depends on the individual. For me personally, I've never expressed any personal side except the I'm like feeling freaked out before my exam. But that was more,
Sure.
maybe I phrased that wrong. More strategies to help calm myself down before going in. But I do see where that line can be crossed. But for me personally, it's more of a tool rather than a replacement. Like it's you could talk to Siri all day if you wanted to, but it's not that
Sure.
genuine connection. Like it's not the face to face talking wise. And I'm not
Sure.
sorry.
Again, you are who you are and you're going to be able to navigate that. I just think about, and I guess I would encourage you to pay attention to your
Mhm.
colleagues and classmates to see how that, if that does change. Again, I think it's not going to be the pervasive issue, but I do think when I look at the epidemic of young people who are, many who are lonely, maybe who are not feeling a part of communities and so forth, whether it's a lack of family support, friends, whatever, this can become a substitute. And again, sometimes
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing, right? To have, whether it's a machine, a book you read, or whatever, a program you watch that suggests, that
Mhm.
encourages you in some way and reduces anxiety and stress. But again, you can see how that continuing on that path can lead to some pretty bad outcomes. I guess I think about that in terms of watching everybody and
Yeah,
how
I'd
they act
say
with AI.
like you said, I grew up knowing like I grew majority of my life was without artificial intelligence or any of that. So I think I have more of a
That's right.
perspective on that. I think you do as well. But I would agree with you, more concerned about the younger generations who they're 5 and they're asking ChatGPT something or asking an AI something.
Oh yeah. No, they don't
Yeah.
know. They, for
Yeah.
them, it's like there's no distinction between this as a person. It's just another
Mhm.
interaction I have. What about other, I guess the other question I want to ask you, just generally speaking, because you presented this in very positive ways in which you're using it as a tutor, as a support. Any other kind of negative things that either you have broached and felt like, ooh, that doesn't quite feel right, or that you've seen, like you kind of mentioned, the three groups of people in your that you've observed, but any other sort of risks that you see happening with AI that you're just
Yeah, I'd
aware of or
say
privy to?
it's like there's biases to it, so you need to be aware of that. I do. Part of me I thinks that could be a benefit if it's used properly to train critical thinking. And I found myself where
Sure.
I'll never, or if I'm trying to find some research, I'll always cross reference it from another source. Um, but definitely bias for sure. Like even if you ask it certain things, one of the things is if you type in questions, I guess there's guardrails now where they won't answer certain subjects. What I think is good, but I'm sure like, and I've heard that there's ways to get around that. If you say, for an example, oh, it's for a class project, then it would tell you whatever. And that it's again, it's how you use it rather than itself doing it. It's based on
Awareness, certainly
yeah,
awareness is the biggest thing, right? To understand that's what's happening. And we can point to lots of examples of tools and things we use in bad ways because we
yeah,
humans are biased and humans
yeah,
will do what humans will do. But as much as we can be knowledgeable about the problems that it presents, I think
yeah.
is that's a big part of it. So as you kind of look towards the rest of your
Hmm.
post-secondary career, and beyond, do you just see it kind of a continuation of, obviously very
Hmm.
difficult to predict where AI will go, other than the fact that you've already got professors and people understanding this is going to be part of your world, the
Yeah,
world of work,
yeah.
for sure. Any kind of perspectives or thoughts as you kind of finish your education and then move
I
on to work?
think when it comes to AI, especially, my hope is that I'm not ever going to be reliant on it. I know some of my peers, like they've become reliant on it because they use it as a substitute. And that's why, really, for me, it's a big thing to actually be training my brain to still approach a subject without having to ask AI to do it for you. What I'd be, it's also, I think, it won't ever go away. That's a reality of which I think we live in now. It's already been introduced, and there's so much money getting poured into it that companies won't pull back on it. So I think it's also how are we going to set up the next generation or set up students who are leaving high school now to use it properly? And that's another. So in my university classes that I'm taking right now, there are guardrails around that where we're allowed and we're encouraged to sometimes cross reference with AI, but we still then need to defend our own arguments with our own thoughts. And I think that's really important because I think what you're seeing more and more in presentations is a perfect example is that they'll use and they'll gather all this information and put into the presentation using AI. But since they're using and they're gathering their information through ChatGPT or whatever it is, they don't actually know the subject fully. And so they can't protect or debate what their stance is. But I do see that's a more critical thing where education maybe would need to change in that direction. But there are like there's negatives, and I do think there's a lot of benefits too. I think it does break down a lot of barriers for certain types of students,
Yeah.
especially like people. Perfect example, ESL students. When I was in Salzburg, I believe it was in March of last year, and I was with a good friend of mine's grandparents who only speak German, and I only speak really English. And we were able to actually communicate for the really the first time without an intermediary using the AI. So I do think that's a benefit, and I for a more connected sort of multicultural world, it might be needed. But
Have you thought too about just, okay, so you've described using it when, I don't know
mhm,
what this thing is, or I'm trying to get myself, or learning
Yeah.
a new thing. What about when you think about the things you are good at,
Yeah.
your strengths? How does that sort of differ in terms of your use of it to amplify the things that you're comfortable with, whether it's speaking or presenting or whatever that might be? Like, do you see a difference between those
Yeah.
uses?
I would say what it's really helped myself. Like one of my biggest weaknesses is getting in habits, being in routines. And I have ADHD, so it's I have all these big goals in my life, but just to start the goal, I find that really hard. So that's where I found it's been useful because it can break it down for me a bit. But I would say once you start doing that, you start then relying on it in that sense of how do I actually achieve this goal or make it more achievable without getting overwhelmed. So I would say that's a negative to it.
Yeah, I think I was just trying to get at the fact that, all right, so it's easy to think about, here's a
Yeah,
thing I don't
yeah,
know. How can AI help me? But what about, here's a thing
mm,
I'm pretty good at? How do I make it better? Or how do I maybe think a little differently from this thing? So you're very confident already. You're just at that stage of
mhm.
trying to refine, take something from very good to excellent, I guess is maybe the way to frame it. I don't know if that's been your experience with using AI in that sense, because we know the other side of, I don't know much about this math concept.
Yeah,
Help me understand that. But what about the things you're already pretty good at and are pretty comfortable with, but
yeah.
you
I'd
can make
say
it
like
better?
it would be. I find myself I'm very good with presentations or getting essay based writing, but for me to help, what's really helped me is that I can't get my thoughts sometimes down on paper as well or organized thoughts. So using it as like a transcriber and then condensing those points, what then allows me to spend more time on my finished product rather than continuously trying to figure out what I should write my thesis on. That's a benefit
Right.
for sure.
Yeah. So finally, just what advice would you give, whether it's your high school teachers, if
Mm.
you had to head back to Vancouver and share a little bit about, hey, this is life in post secondary, and here's how those folks are dealing with it. I think, what advice would you give to high school teachers in particular in terms of what do they do
Yeah,
about
like
it?
I think they need to embrace it, but they need to embrace it with structure. So they like students learn from what they see. When you're that young, you're very you watch and then you do. So I think teaching AI as a resource rather than a replacement is super key because if you continuously use it as a replacement, you stop using your brain, you stop learning and wanting to learn. But that comes with AI literacy. And so really it's across checking. It's how do you actually do prompts properly? What are good ways to use it? What are like teaching those soft skills and those hard skills? But coming with that, it's the I think the hard part would probably be the grading aspect. Because for teachers, especially now, even when I was in high school at the end of it, people would be using AI to pass like tests, to do whatever, write their entire essays for them. So I'd say transition from less of a essay or writing based thing, which not supervised, or projects not supervised, to like in class participation, debating, and then focusing on a presentation and then having to defend it. And I think as we continuously go forward, especially with AI, those skills are going to be very critical. If you want to, in the real world, is how can you clearly articulate your point and defend it, even though someone could search up a question on ChatGPT and bring down your entire argument. And so just the guardrails would be a big one. Resource, it's a resource, it's not a replacement. It's like the calculator. Back in the 80s when the graphing calculator was introduced, I'm sure a lot of calculus profs were worried to the same extent where now there's no need for you to learn calculus because you could type it into one screen. But as we learned, it was feared, but now it's more of an essential resource.
Yeah, it'll take us a
Yeah,
little
of
bit
course.
longer maybe
Yeah.
to get there. I'm not sure, but yeah, and I again, these are one of these things where there's probably not easy answers to it, but I also think really hearing from people like yourselves and the people in those other groups, I think are interesting to hear from too. Those that are very hesitant
Yeah.
to use it at all, and those that are using it all the time, in trying to understand, number one, their motivation. Because I also think too, I think we might assume that the kids are using it all the time just to get the answers, are simply trying to bypass their
Mhm.
learning, which
Yeah.
maybe, but I also think there may be some other reasons why they're choosing to do that. And I don't know. I think those are,
I think that comes
yeah,
down to if you're introduced a new technology with no guidance on how to use it, you're most likely going to abuse the system. And there needs to
sure.
be some sort of guardrails or even teaching how do you effectively use this and how are you going to use it to benefit yourself when it comes to learning, like tutoring, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And those students who are using it in what we would maybe describe as
Mhm.
less than optimal ways, at some point that will, it'll find whether they get through their education, but in the world of work, maybe there's a point where, oh, you really don't actually
Yeah.
understand this thing that you got hired to do to the degree that others have, or whatever that may be. So at some point it'll be evident, but better to find that out sooner
Yeah, and I
than,
think that
than
will
later.
be for individuals to do that, that would be a very big wake up call in university. If you hand in fully AI work, they know it goes straight away through an AI checker, and it's not like in high school where you get a
Right.
zero on that exam. You're kicked out of the school and it's on your record.
Yeah, yeah, the consequences are pretty severe. But also, I think it's also maybe, I don't know, maybe good that you have this wide variety of professors who have varying views of AI. So the professor that wants no AI, you have to quickly adjust to what
Mhm.
that world is like. The one who embraces it, you're building your literacy skills, hopefully along the way, but being able to think about those, that's life. There's lots of people, there's lots of situations where AI won't help
Yeah.
you, can't help you, and other situations where it's very helpful. So I think maybe that's
Mhm.
not such a bad thing
Definitely.
that you have to
Yeah.
navigate just different. Well, here's a new situation. Are
Yeah.
we in, or what are the rules, right? So as long as they're clear with you, here's the rules, whether you like them or not, at
Yeah.
least you know what the rule, like
And
that's the
it's
structure, I
really
suppose.
interesting. I started a new calculus course yesterday, and what my calculus prof said was that you can use AI fully, but you need to still understand how to do it because when it comes to the exam in December, you're going to be crying and trying to ask ChatGPT how to solve your math work, and then you'll fail. Like so, you have to. I
Yeah.
think that's the thing. Now you can use it, but you still need to learn it. You can just maybe streamline the process a
Right.
little bit
Right.
of taking the notes, and then you can memorize it that way instead.
Right. And I think I always find it interesting between the way different disciplines deal with it too. So the math and science folks perhaps have an easier way to assess and evaluate because they can kind of strip away the technology and focus on and manipulate
Mm.
questions, so that you're still identifying whether this student actually does understand and know the things that they need to know. Whereas in the
Yeah.
humanities with writing and things, it's still, you still can, I guess, assess for that, but so much of the work in humanities is not, comes down to a 1 or 2 hour
Yeah.
exam. It's a little broader than that. So I think both different disciplines have to address it differently and think through, what is it that I actually want this student to know and
Mhm.
be able to do, and how do I know that they know and are able to do these kind of things. And that's a big challenge
Yeah, for
for
sure.
everybody, right?
I would. The one thing is, so how my school is set up very differently than how it is in North America. So I have assignments throughout the semester, but they're not worth any marks. And so you have one final come the end of the semester where it's every single thing you've learned,
Okay.
and you're in an exam hall with 15 proctors walking around you, and you can't leave. So you have your pen, your paper, and your brain. That's really it. And I guess maybe that's why they're a little bit more accepting of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. And I know, who knows? And again, I think in high schools for sure, they've come to realize that's probably
Yeah.
not a great way to assess
Yeah.
learning. But yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. I think post secondary kind of is at least at this point able to navigate that because they have this other structure that says, well, this is where all the things, this is where all your learning
Yeah.
is going to be assessed. And whether that's the best way to do it or not, it is a way that kind of takes away the uncertainty of AI. So anyway, I'm going to get you out of here with
Yeah.
3 really quick questions, and then you get on with your day. All right. The first question is, and then this is really going to be hard for you because you are immersed in studying, and I don't know, maybe you have to go back to the summer. I don't know, anything that you read
Yeah.
or listen to, and it could be for personal enjoyment, but also like you're just trying to learn something maybe outside of
Yeah.
your
I'm a really big
school.
podcast guy. Actually, so I listen to a podcast
Okay,
every single
give me your
morning when I first wake up. Um,
okay,
yeah,
give me a
so
that
I
you
listen to
like.
the Daily every single morning, and it's by the New York Times, and it's about all of the big stories from the last day. So it's a 25-minute debrief. I really like that because I like being up to date in what's happening in the world. When I
Yeah.
have time, it's always the Diary of a CEO. That's a little bit more, yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Stephen
that's
Bartlett.
it's like a feel good story sometimes, but you can learn from where they went wrong, and also I find it a little bit motivating.
Sure.
Okay, and then The Office. I've rewatched The Office about 6 times now. It's my mindless entertainment after studying. Yeah,
Oh, there you go. Yeah, and The Office is yeah, that's it's actually, I would say, is as much cross generational
yeah,
as a lot of shows are. Like, it's, yeah, young people like it, and people like myself are into it as well. All right, so you can pick either. You're a North
yeah,
Van kid, am I
yeah.
correct? Okay, so give me. Let's do North Van because this is supposed to be kind of Canadian. So what's a go to place? I'm gonna be in Vancouver in a couple weeks. Give me a place in North Van. Could be like a restaurant, could be like a hiking spot, could be whatever. Just a place this is kind of a cool place in North
I
Vancouver.
was really fortunate. I grew up really close to Lynn Canyon. What's beautiful? There's a suspension bridge during the summer. There's a bunch of swimming holes that we can go to, but I love that. That would probably be my favorite place. Like after school in high school, we'd all go there and you do a little walk into the forest, and it's just all these natural rivers. So that's it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Noah, this has been a treat. Thank you for taking your time to do this. I know you're just getting ready to launch your second year here at the university, and this was great to kind of hear your perspective. So, all the best with the rest of your school this year. And
Yeah,
again,
no
thanks so
worries.
much for
Thank
the
you for
time.
having me.